we're going to talk about percent change as a percent increase or a percent decrease. Now, when this happens, first of all, I kind of want to just talk about the status quo. Let's just use the value of 10. If I multiply 10 by 100%, remember that 100%, if I change that to a decimal, is just 1. So that would be the same as 10 times 1, which is 10. So at any point in time, if we multiply by just 100%, that is just staying the same. That is not an increase. That is not a decrease. That is the same. So then if we talk about a percent increase, that means we need our number to get bigger when we multiply. So if we talk about a percent increase, we're always going to use 100 as our base because, again, when we multiply by 100, that stays the same. Then we will add the percent increase. And this is how we can find our piece here. With percent decrease, we'll use 100 as our base because, again, that stays the same. And we're going to subtract our percent decrease. And this will make more sense as we get in. But the big key to remember here is the base. That 100 is your status quo. That is where we want to stay the same. All right, so let's fill in the table below. I'm not really going to worry too much about this first line, but when we think about 10% less, less implies that we're going to take 100 and subtract 10, which is where we get the 90. So you got to think like what's left. If I take away 10% from our base of 100, that leaves us with 90% of whatever we're talking about. If we talk about a 20% decrease, we would take 100 minus 25, and we're left with 75% of whatever. 30% lower than, well, that would be 100 minus 30. 60% less than would give us 40. So this is like what's left. You would use this, let's say you're shopping and something is 30% off. Well, if it's $10, look at me just doing an example on the fly here. You could say, well, if it's 30% off, I subtract from 100, that means 70% is still there. So 70% of $10 is what I'm going to pay, which is 0.7 times 10, and that is $7. So the whole idea is what percent is left, that's how much you're going to deal with. Works the same with more than. So if 10% more, again, we start with 100 as our base, but because it's more, we add. And that's where they get the 110. 18% greater, we take our 100, we add 18, and we have 118. 50% increase, that's 100 plus 50. 100% increase, well, that makes it 200%. There are a lot of businesses that do a 100% increase of markup when they put it on the shelf. So if they bought something for $10, they sell it to you for $20, and that is how they make their money. Now, when you do this, you can either use proportions or equations to solve. Now, when we use proportions, remember that a proportion is a ratio equaling another ratio. So one ratio is always going to be the percent over 100. And then we can say we're going to put new over old, where old is our reference value. You can think part to whole. You can think all sorts of different things. I generally like to use, for this second ratio, words. I'm a big words person. So let's do a couple examples where I can show you this. Rental rates in Gary are 25% more than rental rates in Muncie, where they are $635. What are the rental rates in Gary? Now, there are a lot of numbers, there's a lot of pieces, and sometimes this can be a little bit overwhelming. So start with the percent. 25% more. 25% more. So that should say, okay, if I have 100 as my base, 25% more, then I always set up proportions. I'm just going to say it. My first ratio is going to be 125 over 100, right? Because it's percent over 100. And because this one says 25% more, we're going to have that 125. So now that I have my first ratio, I like to think, we have Gary and we have Muncie. What's more, Gary or Muncie? because whatever is more is going to be in the numerator. So rental rates in Gary are more than Muncie. So that means Gary is represented in the numerator, Muncie is represented in the denominator. This is how my brain works. So now then when I look at this and it says in Muncie where they are 635. So 635 is Muncie, and it also says what are the rates in Gary. So I don't know the rates in Gary, but in Muncie there's 635. That is the process of setting up the proportion. So I can cross multiply. 100x equals some big number, 79,375. I divide both sides by 100, and x, or the rental rates in Gary, are $793.75. Let's do one more here. Rental rates in Fort Wayne are $687, which is 13.2% less than the rental rates in Indianapolis. Find the rental rates in Indianapolis. Again, can be very confusing of what do I do with these numbers? How do they relate? Start with your percent. 13.2% less. So I have 100 minus 13.2, which is 86.8. Right? That's our new percentage. So I'm going to put percent over 100. Okay, now we're looking at Fort Wayne and Indianapolis. Which is which? Well, Fort Wayne is less than Indianapolis. So the smaller number is where Fort Wayne will go, and Indianapolis will be the higher one because Fort Wayne is less than Indianapolis. So now when I'm looking at my other side, rental rates in Fort Wayne are $687. We're trying to find those in Indianapolis. So I cross multiply. 86.8x equals 68,700. Divide both sides by 86.8, whoop, and rounded to the nearest penny, I end up with rental rates in Indianapolis to be roughly $791.47. And that is playing with these percentages. Bye-bye.